Jack Callaghan, a 73-year-old veteran, lives on the outskirts of Flagstaff with his attack dog Scout, who saved the lives of his comrades while serving in Afghanistan. After a humiliating video goes viral and Scout is subsequently evicted, Jack and Scout experience neglect, loss, and then a wave of support from their fellow veterans. Thanks to caring veterans and the Army, Scout receives medical care, and Jack finds a new home and acceptance. Welcome to my channel. My name's Jack Callaghan. I'm 73, a former Army Ranger who served 2 tours in Kandahar back when the dust never settled and the nights were longer than time itself. These days, I live quietly on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona, with my old companion, a Belgian Malinois named Scout. Now Scout, he's more than just a dog. He's the last thread connecting me to the war, to the friends I lost, and to the part of me that never came home. Back in 2008, during an ambush on Route Dagger, Scout sniffed out a pressure plate IED that would have wiped out half our squad. 4 of us made it through that day because of him. 4 families got one more chance to say, "I love you," because of that dog. When the war ended, the Army had plans for Scout. Regulations said working dogs either stayed in service or got adopted out to handlers with the facilities to support them. But I wasn't about to leave him behind. Not after what we'd been through. I pulled every string I had, called every buddy still in uniform, filed papers until my hands cramped. We shipped out together. I told my CO, "We're coming home the same damn way." He's old now, Scout. Real old. His coat's grayed around the snout, and he walks stiff with arthritis. His ears don't twitch when I call his name anymore, but his eyes, though clouded, still find me in a room full of strangers. Every morning we take our slow walk to Buffalo Ridge Park. We've got a bench under a cottonwood tree where we sit together, me with my old paperback westerns, and Scout sprawled across the grass. I read to him sometimes. Silly, maybe, but I like to think he still understands. "Remember that sandstorm on the Helmand Road?" I'll whisper. "Couldn't see past the hood of the Humvee, but you kept on, nose to the wind, never missed a step." Last Tuesday, while we were sitting on our bench, I noticed a group of young men laughing nearby. At first, I didn't pay them no mind, kids are kids, after all. But then one of them pulled out a phone and pointed it right at us. "Yo," I heard him say, "check out this old coot talking to his dog like it's answering back." They caught me leaning over, whispering to Scout, pausing like I was waiting for him to respond. Which, in a way, I was. That video? It hit the internet like wildfire. Caption said, "Loco Grandpa thinks his mutt's a Marine too." Real clever. By the time we got home, folks I barely knew were sending me messages. Some mocking, a few asking if I was okay. Like I needed their pity. That afternoon, the park manager came by. Young guy, name's Carson. Polite enough, but clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Callaghan," he said, "we've had a few concerns about your conversations with your dog. Some parents are unsettled." Unsettled? I asked. He shifted his weight, I starting. "Maybe, if it's not too much to ask, you could, limit that kind of behavior to private spaces." I nodded. Didn't argue. What would have been the point? I've faced down insurgents with RPGs. A disapproving look doesn't shake me, but it cut deeper than I thought it would. Hearing that my quiet moments with Scout made people uncomfortable. Scout struggled to stand as I gathered our things. His legs stiff, back hunching low, but he pushed himself upright beside me. "It's okay, boy," I murmured, brushing my hand over his head. Let him laugh. "You never left me behind, not once." He pressed his snout into my palm, a gesture unchanged by years. Together, we walked slowly toward the gate, their laughter echoing behind us like shrapnel. And that was just the beginning. 2 weeks after the video made its rounds, I got a letter taped to the door of my apartment. Bold red stamp at the top, notice of eviction. The reason? Unauthorized animal on premises. Failure to submit service documentation. Now I'd submitted that paperwork 3 times. Scout's service records were buried under redacted files and clearance levels I no longer had access to. His status wasn't some emotional support certificate printed off the internet. It was classified, tied to missions nobody talks about in public. But bureaucracy doesn't care about loyalty. Bureaucracy cares about checkboxes. No family to fall back on. My pension barely covered rent and meds as it was. I sold what I could, some old furniture, my guitar, a few medals I'd hoped to pass down someday, and bought a rundown RV. Ugly thing. Smelled like mildew and motor oil. But it ran. I parked it on the northern edge of town, beside Lake Ash Hollow. Scout and I used to train nearby before our second deployment. Place still held a strange sort of peace, like the wind remembered better times. Each morning we'd walk the trail around the lake. Slow now. Scout took careful steps like every motion was a negotiation with his joints. I matched him, stride for stiff stride. Then came the morning he collapsed. It happened near the eastern trailhead. One minute he was sniffing the brush line, the next his legs buckled and he went down hard. I dropped beside him, heart hammering like gunfire. His body jerked, convulsing. Seizure. I scooped him up, all 70 pounds of him, and ran. That old RV groaned to life like a wounded beast, and I tore through town to the nearest vet clinic, Red Rock Veterinary on Franklin and 6th, stormed through the doors cradling him in my arms like a child. He needs help, I gasped to the receptionist. Please. I don't have much, but I'll work. Anything. Just help him. She barely looked up. Maybe 23, nose ring, dead eyes. We don't provide charity care, sir. If you can't pay up front, there's a shelter clinic across town that offers affordable euthanasia. Euthanasia. I swear something inside me cracked. I'm not here to kill him, I whispered. I'm here to save him. She just shrugged. So I sat down in the corner of the waiting room, Scout trembling in my lap, my coat wrapped around him to keep him warm. I crushed my pain meds into his water, tried to ease the tremors. I didn't cry. That reflex was trained out of me long ago. But my hands, gnarled and shaking, kept stroking his fur in slow, practiced circles. That's when I noticed the kid. Mid-teens, shaggy hair, leaning against the wall by the vending machine. He kept sneaking glances at us. Then he pulled out his phone. Another video. This one captioned, "Dog Whisperer's back. Guess his therapist's having a bad day." By nightfall, it was viral. Again. The comments were worse this time. Someone get this guy a straitjacket. I'd say put the dog down. And maybe the old man too. People are cruel when they can hide behind screens. I carried Scout back to the RV, wrapped him in every blanket I had, and stayed up all night, watching his chest rise and fall, making sure each breath still came, whispering stories to him about our old squad, about Martinez, who couldn't shoot straight but made the best camp coffee you ever tasted, about Lane, who brought a harmonica into a war zone and somehow never lost it. You remember that storm outside Spin Boldak? I murmured. You led me out like a bloodhound with a compass. He didn't respond, but his paw twitched like maybe, just maybe, he did. Most folks watching those videos never noticed the tag on Scout's collar. It wasn't cute or store-bought. It was issued by the United States Army. Stamped into the metal were the words, K9 U.S. Army 7711. Fallujah 2008. Saved 4 lives. Purple Heart recipient. And just under that, Corporal Scout. He'd been promoted in country after saving us from a tunnel bomb network that would have buried us all. You don't abandon a fellow ranger. Not in the dirt, not in old age, and not when he's got one paw in the next world. By the next morning, Scout's breathing was shallow, each rise of his chest like a battle fought and barely won. I could see it in his eyes too, the fatigue, the weight. But there was something else there too. Something that hadn't left him since Kandahar. Loyalty. I'd run out of options. The vet had made it clear no cash, no care. So I did what I had to do. Drove 20 miles east to a livestock feed store. Told the clerk, older guy with tobacco-stained fingers, that I needed antibiotics. He didn't ask too many questions. Just gave me a bottle and said, "Hope it helps, brother." Wasn't the kind of medicine Scout needed, but it was something. Back at the RV, I crushed the pills, mixed them with canned dog food, and sat with him. Read to him from an old Louis L'Amour novel we'd started years ago. Same thing I used to do on cold nights in the desert, when thunder sounded too much like artillery and every shadow felt like a sniper's perch. Later that afternoon, a jogger passed by. Young woman, earbuds in, tight ponytail, the whole deal. She spotted me sitting outside the RV with Scout's head in my lap. She stared for a second, then shook her head and muttered, "Weird old vet," like it was a curse. Didn't faze me. I've heard worse. But I won't lie, every comment like that chips away a little more. Scout stirred once that night. Let out this low, gravelly whine, half pain, half memory. I think he was dreaming of the mountains, of the sound of choppers over Helmand, or maybe just of dry grass and freedom. By the time morning rolled around, he hadn't moved. His food bowl was untouched. I wrapped him in the coat I wore the day we left Forward Operating Base Wolfhound, laid beside him, and waited. 3 hours later, I heard tires crunch gravel. I looked out the window. Black SUV. Government plates. It came to a full stop with the kind of precision that only comes from military training. 5 figures stepped out. Dress blues, polished shoes, every one of them standing tall despite the Arizona heat. The one in front, a tall man with silver at the temples, knocked twice on the RV's door. I opened it, still cradling Scout, who barely stirred. "Mr. Jack Callaghan?" he asked, voice formal but respectful. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Who's asking?" "I'm Master Sergeant Langley," he said, snapping a perfect salute. "These are Lieutenant Vasquez, Corporal O'Connor, Lance Corporal Chin, and Private First Class Rivera." I returned the salute. Muscle memory. Then Langley said something I'll never forget. "Sir, Scout saved my life near the Sanjan River in 2009. You both did. And today, we're here to return the favor." I didn't move. Couldn't speak. Langley stepped closer, gently placing a hand on the back of the makeshift couch I sat on. "The commandant saw the footage," he continued. "He was not pleased. Orders were given. Scout's been reinstated to honorary active service. That makes him eligible for full medical benefits at the Naval Veterinary Hospital in San Diego." I blinked. "But he can't travel. He can barely breathe." "We brought a medical transport, sir. Climate-controlled, low vibration, with an onboard vet and techs. Your old partner is going to get every ounce of care we can give." I nodded slowly, not because I believed it fully, but because hope had returned to the edge of my world. O'Connor and Rivera gently lifted Scout onto a stretcher they brought, custom-designed for K-9 veterans. They moved like they were handling something sacred, and in a way, they were. As they carried him out, I stood to follow, but paused. "The people who made those videos," I started. Langley interrupted, his tone steely. "They're being handled. The Pentagon made some calls. Turns out, one of them's an ROTC. Not anymore." We stepped out into the sunlight, and for the first time in what felt like months, I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't invisible. I was a ranger again. And Scout? He was going home. The trip to San Diego took 11 hours. We rode in a quiet hum of wheels and heartbeats. Scout lay sedated in the padded transport bay, and 4 in his foreleg, oxygen tubing nestled gently under his muzzle. I rode beside him, strapped in but still reaching over every few minutes just to feel his fur under my hand, to make sure he was still here. Master Sergeant Langley rode up front with the vet crew, checking in every half hour with quiet professionalism. Occasionally, he'd glance back at me, never said much, just a small nod that said, "You're not alone anymore, brother." We pulled into the Naval Veterinary Hospital just after dusk. The place gleamed white under the overhead lights, clean and precise like a fresh dress uniform. There were no cameras, no reporters. Langley made sure of that. This wasn't a story for clicks or headlines. It was something purer, older. A kind of atonement we don't often get to witness in this world. Scout was wheeled inside with all the care of a general, and I walked beside the gurney, my hand resting lightly on his back. Inside, a team of military veterinarians and nurses stood ready. Young faces, but serious ones. Not a single one smirked or looked away when they saw the old dog with his cloudy eyes and fading breath. They saluted. Every single one. "Welcome back, Corporal Scout," one of them said softly. I choked on the lump that rose in my throat. Scout was placed in a private room. Monitors beeped gently, tracking vitals. A nurse placed a folded American flag above his bed. Not for symbolism, Scout had earned that. I slept in a chair beside him for the next 2 nights. The third morning, something changed. He woke before I did. Let out a soft, ragged bark, the kind he used to give just before he'd pick up a scent on patrol. He nudged my arm. Weak, but deliberate. He was still fighting. A few days later, while Scout received treatment, I was invited to a meeting. A group of veterans, Marines, Army, even a couple Air Force guys, had pulled together something incredible. "Mr. Callaghan," said one of them, a bearded guy named Sergeant McCall, "you're not going back to that RV." "What do you mean?" He pulled out a packet. Photos. A deed. A small cabin, 1 mile from Lake Ash Hollow. Handicapped accessible, no mortgage. "It's yours." We pulled the strings. The Veterans United Foundation sponsored the rest. My breath caught. We also made sure Scout gets regular at-home care. Every 6 weeks. Free of charge. I just stared at them. I didn't know how to say thank you. So I did what we used to do in the field when words weren't enough. I extended my hand. Every one of them shook it like I was one of their own. Because I was. That night, I visited Scout's room. Sat beside him again, this time with the news. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "No more RV. No more cold mornings. Just you." Me, and a cabin with a porch facing west. You're gonna watch the sunsets again, just like old times. He looked up at me, blinked slow, and nudged his nose into my palm. We were going home. For real this time. 2 weeks later, we rolled into the gravel drive of our new place. It wasn't fancy. One-story log cabin, pitched roof, pine trees all around. Porch had a swing that creaked when the wind picked up. Inside, the walls smelled like cedar and old stories. But to me and Scout, it was heaven. They'd even painted a small wooden sign next to the front step. Scout's post. Underneath it, a bronze plaque that read, "For service, for loyalty, for never leaving a man behind." I didn't cry, not really. Just stood there a moment and let the world slow down. The Veterans United crew had set the place up with care. Scout's bed was orthopedic, right next to mine. The pantry was stocked. There was even a stack of paperbacks by the armchair, westerns, and war memoirs, with a note tucked inside the first one. Every warrior deserves peace. Welcome home, Jack. I sat down on the porch that evening, Scout beside me, wrapped in an old wool blanket. The sunset rolled in like a slow wave of fire across the sky. I pulled out a battered paperback, started reading the way I used to in the desert. You remember this one, boy? I asked. The one with the outlaw and the old sheriff who never gave up. Scout didn't move, but I saw it, the twitch of his ear. The memory still lived in him, just like it did in me. A week later, I got a letter from the local elementary school. They wanted me and Scout to come speak at their Veterans Day assembly. I almost turned it down. I'd never liked public speaking. But Scout? He'd earned every pat, every salute. So I wrote back and said we'd attend, as long as Scout didn't have to do stairs. We rolled in that morning, both of us wearing our best. I wore my old Class A jacket, still fit, mostly. Scout wore his K9 vest, cleaned and brushed. The kids were quiet when we entered, wide-eyed. A little boy near the front whispered to his teacher, "Is that a real soldier dog?" The teacher smiled and nodded. Scout sat at the front of the gym like he'd done 100 stakeouts. Calm, alert, proud. I didn't speak much, just told them a few stories. Kept it simple. When I was done, a little girl raised her hand. "Is your dog a superhero?" I looked down at Scout. He met my gaze, and I swear there was a glint of something in his eyes. Mischief maybe, or just plain heart. "No," I said, voice soft. "He's just a soldier. Like me, only better." When we left, every kid wanted to pet him. And Scout, old and aching as he was, let them. One by one, tail thumping slow, but steady. That night, I sat on the porch again. Scout at my feet. The stars came out one by one, shy and flickering. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was living. We were finally home. About a month after we settled in, Scout's health took another dip. His appetite dropped, and he struggled to rise on his own. But he never whimpered, never made a fuss. He still followed me to the porch every morning, even if I had to carry him the last few steps. Then one afternoon, a knock came at the door. It was Langley, Master Sergeant, this time in civilian clothes, flanked by 3 Marines I didn't recognize. They stood sharp and silent, a folded flag in one man's hands. "We heard Scout's not doing well," Langley said. "Thought we'd stop by." He didn't have to say more. I nodded and stepped aside. They came in and knelt around Scout, who lifted his head slowly. Langley saluted him without hesitation. "We're here for a brother," he said. They didn't stay long, just enough to show respect. Before leaving, they presented me with a frame. Inside it was a photo, Scout in full gear, beside me in Hellman, dusty and alert. Beneath it, engraved in brass, Corporal Scout, U.S. Army K9. Served with honor. I hung it right above his bed. Scout made it through the winter, but just barely. One morning in early spring, I found him lying beside the porch door, staring out at the lake. He didn't lift his head when I spoke, just wagged his tail, once. I sat beside him and placed his head in my lap. He let out a long, low sigh. Not pain, just release. I stayed like that for hours. The sun moved across the sky. The wind kicked up little ripples on the water. I stroked his ears and told him stories from our first tour, like I had 1,000 times before. When the time came, he passed quietly. No sound, just a stillness that filled the room. I buried him out back under the tallest pine on the ridge. Wrapped in his old vest, with his tag and photo by his side, I carved a simple marker. Corporal Scout, K9, U.S. Army. Faithful to the end. The cabin felt quiet afterward. Too quiet. But every night, I still talked to him from the porch. Habit, maybe. Or maybe just faith that he was still listening. A few days after Scout passed, I got a visit from the park ranger, Linda, a kind woman who'd heard about Scout through the local grapevine. "We're putting up a memorial at Buffalo Ridge," she said, "for Scout, and for other service animals like him." I didn't say much, just nodded and handed her a photo. The one of him with the sunset behind his ears. A week later, I stood at the edge of the park with a small crowd. Veterans, families, a few kids holding tiny flags. The plaque was simple, just like Scout would have wanted. In honor of military working dogs. Loyalty without words. Service without condition. That afternoon, as people walked by, I overheard a boy ask his mom, "Can a dog be a hero?" She knelt down and said, "The best kind." I still visit Scout's grave every morning. I bring my coffee, sit by the pine, and talk like he's just dozing beside me. Neighbors wave now. Some stop to chat. The same folks who once crossed the street to avoid me now ask about Scout. They want to know his story. One day, a group of kids came by, led by their teacher. "This is Mr. Callaghan," she said. And this was his partner, Scout. He was a war dog. They stood in silence, reading the marker. One girl placed a daisy at its base. "You think he knew he was a hero?" she asked. I smiled. He knew I needed him. That was enough. One evening not long ago, I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. A car pulled into the gravel drive. Out stepped a young man in uniform. Nervous, respectful. "You Jack Callaghan?" he asked. "I am." He handed me a letter. "From my father. He passed last year. Told me to find you." I unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Jack, if you're reading this, it means I never got to thank you in person. Scout saved me outside Spin Boldak. You both did. I owe you more than I can say. I named my son after him. Thought you should know. Lieutenant Brian Shaw." The young man stood at attention. "Sir, I wanted to see where he lived. Where he served." I led him out back, to the tree. We stood there for a while. Silent. Reverent. As the wind picked up, I could have sworn I heard the faint jingle of a dog tag in the breeze. Scout's tag. Maybe some bonds don't break. Maybe the faithful never really leave. Semper Fi, old friend.